Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very exciting edition of Training Unleashed. Before we get going, on behalf of the Learning Network, I want to thank everyone for either watching or listening. I also want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio, and remind people we now have a YouTube channel, Training Unleashed Network, and you can subscribe and you can actually watch us do this, or you can go to C-Suite TV and watch us. Today, I have a great guest. His name is Chris Tripoli. And he's a 45-year hospitality veteran, focusing most of his time in the training space, but he's a true expert. And Chris, I'm going to ask this first question because I think some of the people listening are going to go, hospitality, I'm not in hospitality. Do I really want to listen to this? Well, hospitalities, restaurants in particular, to me, are just amazing examples of great training organizations, some intentionally, some just naturally. But what could normal, everyday businesses learn from the best practices in the hospitality space in terms of training?
Well, that's a great point. I think there's a few things that you're right, routine, non-hospitality based businesses can pick up from the training and development used in successful restaurant, bar, hotel organizations. And I think the first one is that you need to look at your training program as a zero-sum game. It isn't something that you get to do once and say, isn't it wonderful? We hire well, we have great detailed training. We have a lot of reviews. We have tests to make sure our people are competent. And then bingo, we're done. Good training is part of the, everyday ongoing relationship between staff member and leader. And that is something that, of course, it's apparent in a day-to-day business like hospitality. I think the second point would be the type of training needs to be adjusted to the way people learn today. Restaurants that do this well do that very well. And I think every business can do that to make sure that we're staying current with not just half of training, which is the giving of valuable information, but the training part that really works, which is the way people learn today. That changes.
Before we go further, let's come back to this because I like to refer to that first thing as you refer to as knowledge sharing. When you're
Yeah.
talking at people, you're sharing knowledge, you're not really training, you're sharing knowledge. What is today, because I think restaurants are on top of it, what are the key highlights or best practices for a restaurant to train people effectively as you're describing it?
The best thing to do is take it away from the singular person follow, which is where we were stuck years ago. By that, I mean, I've selected this person in the kitchen, this person in the front of the house, or I've selected this particular manager. Follow him or her. And when they say you're ready, you're ready. It's more of an engaging program now, and it's a lot more interactive. So, in order for people to learn, they've got to be interactive. They've got to be able to read, but also write. They've got to be able to taste. They've got to be able to participate, speak. This is what creates that bond and creates that comfort zone that they really feel like, okay, I've got it. And we found that when people feel more comfortable, then they actually do their job in a more confident manner. Comfort and confidence seems to work together. So that seems to be the best practice is involvement of more than one person and involve more than one of your senses.
So, do most restaurants, so at the Learning Network, we work with large restaurants all the time. We create e-learning for them, we create leader-led training for them. They're formal processes. But I would imagine the individual restaurant doesn't have the luxury of doing that because of the cost would be exorbitant for the benefit. So is there a designated person to train, or is it just different people, different roles, all know that their role requires training? How does that kind of culturally work?
Yeah, that's a very good point because you're right. It's the same thing, whether you're a really large company with a more corporate culture and you've got this kind of support mechanism, like you pointed out, or whether it's maybe the listener's favorite chef-owned restaurant that's in the neighborhood, or the onesie twosie or the mom and pops. Well, guess what? They have to do the same thing and they don't have the professional resources and written materials and interactive videos and whatnot. So there's typically more than one person, though. To do this right, they will have people for designated roles. So they might have somebody who's very good with the initial onboarding and the touring, the introduction, the overview, the paperwork. They're very accurate, and they're very welcoming. So you get a great first impression. That might not be the best person, though, that's going to teach the 9 steps of service and the customer interaction. Or if this is more of a back of the house, this might not be the same person that has the technical knowledge for product handling, food prep, timing of service, chef skills. So it does take a team. And there's the challenge because the people that, we spend most of our time working with are that smaller growing company, and they need assistance in identifying those people. And then, of course, training those people.
So what I'm hearing you're saying is you need to find the right people for the right role at the right time. Might take a while for a company to have that shake out, and you might have to train the trainer on how to actually do some of those roles.
Absolutely. You have to train the trainer. That's sometimes the first mistake that is made in the world of the independent hospitality owner, the guy that has a small restaurant and he's also doing catering, or again, your favorite chef-owned dinner place or the bar down the street. Is too many times they have good thoughts and they have good expectations. Their problem is they don't necessarily have the right person. They pick someone who's just been there the longest. Now,
Yeah.
nothing against longevity. Love customer loyalty. Longevity is good. That doesn't necessarily make the best trainer. Or they pick the server who has high sales. So follow Valerie. She's going to be the trainer because customers love her and she always does high sales. She may not also be interested or have the ability to train and follow up and review and bond and instill confidence in others. And those are the characteristics that we look for when we designate a trainer.
So from my experience in the restaurant space, the one thing that I really love, because everything you've described in some degree, most good training organizations are doing in regular businesses.
Mhm.
They maybe are not doing it as frequently because in restaurants the turnover is a little bit greater, maybe not as deliberately. But the one thing that I've noticed in restaurants that they tend to do differently in one fashion or another, I'm going to use a term that you might say that's not the real term, but I call it the daily huddle. And that's when every server comes in and the chef comes out and says, hey, these are the specials for today. Or we've got a lot of this, we want to sell this, or here are the desserts. And maybe that happens a couple different times a day. Maybe there's a lunch shift or a dinner shift. But I think that the energy and the enthusiasm and the team built in these huddles really is a differentiator. Now you might tell me, well, Evan, you've been lucky because you've been dealing with people doing huddles, but most restaurants don't do huddles. So do restaurants do huddles and are they effective?
Well, yes, most do. And those that don't really suffer. But yes, most do. And whether you call them a huddle or an alley rally or a pre-shift meeting, it goes by many terms. So you're right on target. But are they helpful? Absolutely. And one of the reasons why most people will tell me they're helpful is in addition to learning from the chef and actually tasting what the special is going to be so we can describe it. And in addition to getting that little energy, that camaraderie, because for you listeners that are out there that maybe feel like you've been engaged in these and maybe they don't really work, maybe they're done wrong, short and involved is what works. So if you've got a team of 8 or 9 servers, and I always include the host staff and the bar person and the busser, let everyone hear the chef talk about the day's special and then go around and ask people to participate. So a good quick alley rally or pre-shift meeting is going to get them engaged in talking about what did you think of the special? What wine would you suggest with that? What dessert do you think is going to go good with that? Now people are talking and everyone is getting sort of an energy playing off of each other rather than just the manager gives them a few shift rules and the chef tells them the proper way to pronounce the fish special, and bingo, we're done. So you can't do that. And the reason you can't do that is because you're also looking for focus. These people just came in, it's 15 minutes to opening, and they've got other things on their mind. Until you get them directed on the special and until you get them focused on guest service and steps of service and suggestive selling, they're thinking about the last song they heard on the radio driving in. They're thinking about that bad boyfriend who didn't call last night, or the, radiator hose that's leaking, or I'm 2 days away from paying rent. Trust me, they're not thinking ready to go until you help them get ready to go.
Yeah. Well, we could talk more about this, but always understanding on what's on someone else's plate gives you a lot of perspective on how they act and how they behave. Just
Mhm.
share this with you. I was consulting with this printing company. They're really cool. Like if you need something printed that's like outrageously large, that's who you would go to. That's
Oh,
the kind of printing company. And their company was in a rut. And one of my suggestions to them was that they do a morning pep rally where they bring everybody in, and everyone that's going, I'm going to go do signs here, I'm going to go signs here, I'm doing this in a high energy way. And everyone, shares all the exciting stuff they're going to do. And then they play a song, dance, and then they go to their day work, which just gives energy to the whole organization. And it was transformative experience because he took a company where people every day were sort of just drudging along, and he started the day with a mood change to get people focused, which is sort of like what we're talking about with these daily meetings. So I'm going
yes,
to change subjects because a big part of what you like to do is coaching.
yes.
And I know you have a methodology called the 3 E's. And I thought it'd be great if you could share that with everyone.
Well, absolutely. In hospitality, the successful clients, again, whether they're small growing companies, large restaurants, that have dining and private dining and bars and catering, or the smaller counter service, more limited menu. The one thing that we see in particular that works is the formula for ongoing development of your key people and your managers. And you're right, it kind of boils down to the 3 E's. The first one is that successful hospitality leaders must embrace the change in the people that they are looking to for staff members. Team members today, whether they're part-time or full-time, whether they're full service or counter service, they're not looking for jobs like people were looking for jobs 10 years ago. People are looking more for a place. And if you don't embrace that change, if you don't create an opportunity for them to feel welcome, like this is a place I should be, I feel good here. I'm going to be respected here. I'm going to be able to participate here. Of course, I'm going to work. Of course, I'm going to pick up a paycheck. But those aren't the first things on people's mind today. So when we work with someone, we've got to sort of coach them into that behavior because some established restaurant operators are a little more stuck into that worker mentality and they're looking for a job. I'm giving them a good job. Now let's move on. And as we've learned that that's not it. You've got to embrace the change that's out there. And once you do, you're going to start seeing that a selection process and initial training becomes a whole lot easier. And then the second thing is to always engage staff and key leaders. Some of the best answers to issues in restaurants and bars come from the people that are doing the doing. The line cook, the morning prep person, the bakery person, the server on the floor. You've got to engage people into the process. Share information, like your point earlier. The training is really a sharing of knowledge. So why aren't leaders sharing the purpose of this business? If you own a couple of restaurants, why don't the staff know why? What was the driving force? It isn't just you like your recipe for the toppings on the pizza. What's the purpose? What are we doing this for? How are we going to create a company? How are we going to become active in a community? How are we going to provide impact? So without knowledge of purpose and vision, it's hard to get people interested. Once they're interested, boy, now you've got them engaged. So let them sit around the table, discuss things that can improve the guest experience. Ask them for hints, improved training, for example, seasonal menuing. Anytime there's an issue that leadership needs to make a decision on, there really should be a small committee of people you're engaging with. The more involved they are, the more they feel, needed, the more they feel listened to. That leads to that comfort zone. We have found people will stay longer and be more productive where they feel like they belong.
Hey, let me tell you a secret. The Learning Network has come out with a new product called Breeze. And Breeze is the easiest to use course creation tool on the marketplace today. You want to look smart, you need Breeze. You want to get engagement, you need Breeze. You want to have a tool that can make you look great and will work with your LMS, you need Breeze. One of the cool things about Breeze is it's all drag and drop, all templated, super easy to be effective, but it's also SCORM based. So it can work in any LMS. And here, get this, when you want to update it, you update it in Breeze and it will automatically update every instant in any LMS that you have the course. Go to learning.net and schedule a demo today. Before you get to the third E, I just want to add something here.
Sure.
To me, when people connect to the passion, the why, the purpose of the business, it is much more impactful. And so when you think about restaurants, you're really creating experiences. You're helping people have first dates. You're helping people celebrate weddings and anniversaries. People are going out to a restaurant because they're looking for this wow experience. And I would think having people share the wows that they help create would help really ignite people into that passion.
Yes.
Uh, so anyhow, I was just thinking about that when you were talking about engagement.
Yeah, and we've learned so much. I mean, a quick story. If we got a minute, I'm going to give you a story on engagement. This was a very, very old, established family-owned company. Been in business 44 years. Pretty well set in their ways. Younger generation getting into leadership positions now. Mom and dad slowing down. Multiple units located in different cities. So we started working with them from the units up. We said, we're going to have to develop a level of engagement. Let's get some of our staff together and all these principles that this new generation of leadership are thinking about. Let's throw those principles at them and get some input because you're talking about some big things here with menuing and service and staff responsibilities and new leadership positions. Let's just get their thoughts. Oh, wow. We don't, what do you mean? I mean, I don't know. Oh, I said, you've got people who have been servers for like 23 years. Wouldn't it be great to just have them sit around the table and ask them thoughts on improving, the guest experience before we just make new rules about it? Oh, I'm not so sure. So anyway, we did one. One unit, one time, and although there were only 8 volunteers for our focus group, it was a Tuesday afternoon. They had their complimentary yogurt, and we threw all these principles out on the table. And they were a little slow at first to get involved. They thought, what's going on here? How come there's, a corporate rep and training reps and my unit manager, and they're asking me my thoughts on this and shifts? So it took a little while, but before you know it, the ideas started going. And all of a sudden, the servers started talking about how busy they are on Sunday brunch. And managers are so upset because the service gets a little slow. And the kitchen gets mad because there's breakage. Well, if we just set up 2 syrup stations instead of the one, we wouldn't have all this cross traffic in the window area. That's going to be quicker time out of the kitchen. We're going to be breaking less monkey dishes. And I'm just sitting there making notes. If we had the bussers do this at night instead of this in the morning, it would help with the daytime cleaning. If the high chairs were hung here instead of there. Anyway, tiny notes, some more important than others, but all of them significant, especially when we hung the thank you note the next day to all staff to see that these following ideas came up and we were so appreciative of their suggestions. And because of that, we're going to be doing this in the kitchen and this on the bus stand, and we're going to do this in the morning, and we're changing the PM checklist to this. Now what happened is the ripple effect. All the staff that didn't understand and were a little standoffish and didn't want to go, we're all standing there going, well, heck, I knew that. I could have told you that. I'll raise my hand. Next month, focus group had 20 people instead of 8. And the engagement started, and everything became a little bit easier to take this very, very established concept and modify it because we got the staff's buy-in first.
I'll tell you just a story to build on what you're talking about, but in a non-restaurant business. This is
Mhm.
a conversion franchise business. We did a whiteboard meeting, and what we did is we brought all the middle managers and all of the employees that we could spare, because you got to run a business, so you can't take everybody.
Right.
And we brought them into a room with a professional facilitator, and we had like 8 different whiteboards. Senior management was not in the room. They were not allowed to be in the room. And the instruction was, do you have a topic you want to discuss? If you do, you grab a whiteboard, you go to a corner of the room, you write the topic, you share the topic. And then after 8 are picked, everyone divides up and goes to the topic they want to talk about and ideas that they have. and people float around, and for a half hour they brainstorm how to make something better of whatever idea they have. Then you
Hmm.
bring them back in, and then they all present their ideas to the group. Someone's taking notes. Then they do it again. This particular example was like a half hour retreat. And then when they're all done, they pick their best five ideas as a group. And then senior management comes back in and they present their ideas. And then senior management either accepts them or doesn't. In our particular case, in this particular example, we've accepted all, but most of the time, maybe there'll be one or two you'll say, well, we want to do that one later or something of that nature. And then
Sure.
we put those sheets up on in the office and then actually execute them. And as we get done with them, and we put a line through, indicating accomplished,
Yeah.
which is really cool. We got to go to the third E. I got to make sure you have time for the third E.
Okay. Well, you're right. You start by embracing and then, of course, engagement, which we could have a whole program on. And then the third, though, is proper leadership needs to empower people to then do their jobs. So people like you were talking about in middle management or in restaurants, you've got your department heads and unit managers. So the leadership position, the owner, supervisor, general manager needs to be prepared to play more of a role of support where we give direction, we give expectation, and then we allow them to do their job. We have to empower people to go lead and provide the service and successfully do the function. Now, obviously, we're there to support. We will evaluate, we'll assist if necessary, but people feel so much better when they are actually able to get the ball and run with it. And also, if you're expecting somebody to run a shift, they need to be able to run that shift. They need to feel responsible for what you trained them to do. And here comes the biggest one. If you empower correctly, then it's much easier for you to hold those people accountable for their shift related responsibilities. People want to feel responsible for what they're doing. And the leader, of course, wants to hold them accountable for what they're responsible for. Without empowerment, that's really hard to do.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever watched the TV show Bear?
Oh, yes.
How
Oh,
real, how real is Bear?
well, I think it's pretty real. And I have to tell you, I've had sort of a I've had sort of a negative feel for most of the operational shows, certainly some of the chef training things that get put on TV, because there isn't a lot of the, throwing food out of the walk-in and yelling and screaming and making the owners cry. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is not a good depiction of the hospitality industry. But the principles that are going on, especially shift related and the inter workings of the people, that's real situational restaurant life.
I love the show, although not so much the last season. But they really, they sent people to other restaurants to train.
Mhm.
I really think that from a training perspective, there's a lot to learn from watching that show. And a lot of it is just watching other people excel so incredibly well in such an inspiring way. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Chris, this has been a great conversation. No doubt our listeners want to know more about you, how they can get in contact with you. I know you have a podcast. And so, please tell us all about you and what you do and who you work with, etc.
Oh, happy to, happy to. I'm a lifer in this industry, Evan. I started as a teenager and never left. I've got over 45 years of being the worker, being the manager. I was fortunate enough to be an owner of a couple different concepts, and then I started doing restaurant development work for others. Done that as a consultant and developer. I got into some education with restaurantowner.com. There's probably the first thing I'd like to suggest. If listeners are interested in learning a little bit more about the principles we're discussing today, they can go to restaurantowner.com. My podcast that you mentioned, thank you. I'm having a ball with that. Corner Booth is what it's called. You can find it pretty much anywhere where you like to go to listen to your podcast, whether it's Apple or iTunes or Spotify,
It's
Google.
it's Corner Booth.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just Corner Booth, not to be confused with, if you put a the in front of it. But Corner Booth is all about sharing stories of today's restaurant entrepreneurs. So we have people that are telling their stories of how they got in, what they did right, what they would never do Again, what they learn from, what their short-term strategies are, how they're adjusting to industry challenges. And of course, that means we spend an awful lot of time talking about labor, finding, training, retaining. It turns into an awful lot regarding people. So, Corner Booth, I'm having a ball with. I'm the principal of a group called the Restaurant Clinic. People can go to the restaurantclinic.com to learn a little bit more about leadership development and coaching services that are provided through the restaurant clinic. But those are the things that are keeping me busy. Website, restaurantowner.com has a plethora of information, and I get to develop content for them and do some webinars. And between that and the podcast and the work I'm doing on Restaurant Clinic, that's what's keeping me busy now.
Sounds like you got a lot going on. Chris, as you know, we always end the show with our guest sharing one tip. If there was one tip people should know, what is that one tip?
In the hospitality industry, I think the one tip, it always boils down to things that people fear. And when I'm working with people, we have them concentrate not fearing competition, not fearing a new trend, not fearing the cost increases. These are all things that with proper leadership can be managed. But the one tip I would give people out there is to always fear mediocrity. Because the moment we feel satisfied, the moment we think we're doing good enough, training is working good, revenue is good, my profits are good, the moment we get hooked on that word good, the moment we're stifling creativity and we're not continuing the road for constant improvement. And so if you just maybe had to think of one thing today, I would say look at whatever business you're doing and challenge yourself that to make sure that the challenge is to always move ahead. Engage your people on what can be done better, what can be done next, because the moment we get self-satisfied, we're stifling our creativity.
It is such an important tip. I have a keynote speech called Seeking Excellence, the Never-Ending Journey.
And it is a never-ending journey.
It is absolutely a never-ending journey.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting better, someone else is. It's amazing. The people watching us on our YouTube network or on C-Suite TV can see that we're both, of course, you have 45 years experience, so they know, we know we're both on the older side. But
We're getting up in the years. I hear you.
But to imagine a company like General Motors that was like the country, there was a saying in the country, as General Motor goes, so goes the country.
Mm,
The richest corporation in the world. I mean, unbelievable success. And they went bankrupt in 2008
right.
because they didn't follow your rule of constantly getting better and not resting on their laurels. So, Chris, on behalf of the Learning Network, thank you. To the audience, on behalf of the Learning Network, thank you all. Thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. And remind everyone, go to our YouTube channel, Training Unleashed Network. Go to our website, trainingunleashed.net, and you can see all the show notes for this, and you can look up all our other guests, all our other shows. Everyone have a great day.